Welcome back to our channel World of Royals.
March 15th, 2026. This is a red-level intelligence update. For years, the public was presented with a carefully polished story about the royal Fab Four. Two brothers, two wives, and a vision of unity meant to represent the future of the British monarchy. Prince William and Kate on one side, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle on the other. Together, they were supposed to symbolize a modern royal family prepared for a changing world. But early this morning, that narrative was shaken. At exactly 6 a.m., investigative author Tom Bower released a new dossier titled Betrayal, Power, Deceit, and the Fight for the Future of the Royal Family. Within hours, excerpts began circulating across the British press. And according to the material already being discussed by royal correspondents, the story behind the Sussex departure may be far more complicated than the public has been told. What we may be witnessing is not simply a family disagreement. According to Bower's research, it could be the collapse of a royal partnership that once looked unbreakable. The turning point, he claims, happened years ago, inside the walls of Kensington Palace. The date was a Tuesday evening in late 2018. The time, 5:30 p.m. The location, Apartment 1A, the private residence of Prince William and Catherine, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had recently returned from their honeymoon. Publicly, everything appeared perfect. The couple had been welcomed warmly by crowds across Britain, and the media continued celebrating the image of the Fab Four as a new royal power team. But behind closed doors, tensions were quietly growing. According to Bower's investigative notes, concerns had already been raised by several palace staff members. Some aides reportedly complained about difficult working conditions, while others questioned whether Meghan was adjusting comfortably to the rigid traditions of royal life. Prince William decided it was time to address the situation directly. What was meant to be a calm conversation between family members quickly became something else. As the discussion grew more serious, William reportedly raised his hand while making a point. It was meant as a simple gesture of emphasis, a brother speaking firmly to another brother about concerns within the household. But Meghan Markle reportedly interpreted the gesture very differently. According to the account described in the dossier, she suddenly responded with a sharp remark that stunned everyone present. She looked directly at the future king and said, "If you do not mind, please get your finger out of my face." The room fell silent. Inside royal culture, hierarchy carries enormous weight. William was not only Harry's older brother. He was also the future king of the United Kingdom. According to sources familiar with the meeting, the tone of the response shocked William. Some insiders say he appeared visibly stunned by the confrontation. But what made the moment so significant was not simply the argument itself. It was what the argument represented. For the first time, members of the royal household began to suspect that Harry and Meghan might not share the same expectations about royal life as the rest of the family. To the palace, royal duty has always been about service. But to Meghan, according to several aides, the system may have looked very different. And that single exchange inside Kensington Palace may have marked the exact moment when the partnership known as the Fab Four quietly began to break apart. What happened next would eventually reshape the future of the monarchy. But to understand how the situation escalated so dramatically, we need to examine the timeline that followed. Because according to Tom Bower's investigation, that meeting was only the beginning. To understand why that moment inside Kensington Palace mattered so much, we need to step back and examine the broader timeline that investigators say was unfolding behind the scenes. According to Tom Bower's dossier, the tensions that later exploded into a global royal drama did not begin with one argument. Instead, they developed slowly through a series of events that gradually reshaped the relationship between Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the rest of the royal family. The timeline begins in May 2018. To the world, that month marked one of the most celebrated weddings in modern royal history. Millions of people watched as Prince Harry married Meghan Markle at Windsor Castle. The ceremony was broadcast across the globe, drawing massive crowds and international attention. Commentators described the marriage as a turning point for the monarchy, a sign that the ancient institution was embracing a more modern and diverse future. In those early weeks, public excitement was overwhelming. Harry and Meghan appeared energetic, confident, and ready to step into their new roles as working members of the royal family. Crowds gathered wherever they traveled, and the media treated them as a powerful addition to the royal team. But according to several palace insiders quoted in Bauer's investigation, small signs of tension began appearing almost immediately after the wedding celebrations ended. The first issue involved the structure of royal work itself. Unlike actors, celebrities, or business executives, members of the royal family do not receive a direct salary for performing official duties. Public appearances, charity visits, diplomatic tours, and community events are considered acts of public service rather than paid engagements. For generations, the arrangement has worked on an informal understanding. The royal family carries out public duties in exchange for status, influence, and financial support provided through official royal funding structures. But according to Bauer's sources, Meghan reportedly viewed this arrangement with confusion. Having spent years working in the entertainment industry, she was accustomed to a system where public visibility often translated directly into financial opportunity. Several aides later claimed she asked detailed questions about how royal work was compensated. At first, the questions seemed harmless. However, the situation became more complicated during the couple's first major international trip as newlyweds. In October 2018, Harry and Meghan traveled to Sydney, Australia, for a large-scale royal tour. The visit was designed to introduce the couple to audiences across the Commonwealth and highlight their role as energetic new representatives of the monarchy. The tour attracted enormous crowds. Thousands of people gathered along the streets to see them, and global media outlets followed every moment of the journey. But according to accounts referenced in Bauer's research, an unexpected comment reportedly occurred behind the scenes during one of the early events. While preparing for an appearance, Meghan allegedly turned to a royal aide and asked a simple question. "Why am I not being paid for this?" For someone coming from the entertainment world, the question might have sounded reasonable. After all, the tour involved long days, constant media attention, and international travel. But inside the royal household, the comment reportedly raised serious concerns. To palace officials, the monarchy operates on a principle that has existed for centuries. Royal duty is service, not employment. If Meghan viewed public engagements as performances rather than responsibilities tied to the institution, it suggested that the couple might be approaching royal life with a very different mindset. Only weeks later, in November 2018, tensions reached the confrontation we discussed earlier. The meeting inside Kensington Palace that left Prince William stunned. According to several insiders, that moment forced senior members of the royal household to reconsider how the Sussexes might fit into the long-term structure of the monarchy. And from that point forward, quiet changes began to take place inside the palace. Changes that would soon become impossible to hide. After the confrontation inside Kensington Palace, subtle but important shifts began taking place behind the scenes. To the public, everything still appeared relatively calm. The Fab Four continued making occasional appearances together, smiling for cameras, and attending official events. But internally, according to Tom Bauer's investigation, palace officials were already discussing how to reorganize the structure of the royal households. For years, Prince William and Prince Harry had shared staff members, offices, and advisors. Their teams worked closely together to coordinate public engagements and media communication. But after the tensions of late 2018, that arrangement began to change. Gradually, administrative operations were separated. Staff members who once worked jointly for both couples were reassigned. Planning for future engagements became increasingly independent. To outside observers, these adjustments seemed like normal logistical decisions. But according to insiders quoted in Bauer's research, they reflected a deeper realization within the palace. The two couples were no longer operating under the same vision for royal life. And as the months passed, the differences between those visions became even more noticeable. The next major turning point arrived in January 2020, when Prince Harry and Meghan announced that they intended to step back from their roles as senior working members of the royal family. The decision shocked the world. News outlets immediately labeled the moment Megxit. Public discussions focused largely on the official announcement itself. The couple's planned to split their time between the United Kingdom and North America while pursuing greater financial independence. But according to Bauer's investigation, something else was happening during that same period. Something much more personal. Several of Harry's longtime friends began noticing an unusual change in communication. Men who had known Harry since his school days at Eton College, as well as others who had served alongside him during his military career, suddenly found it difficult to reach him. Phone calls went unanswered. Messages were not returned. Eventually, many of them discovered that Prince Harry had quietly changed his personal phone number, without informing much of his previous social circle. For individuals who had spent decades in Harry's life, sharing private experiences, protecting his confidence, and supporting him during difficult moments, the silence was confusing. Some assumed he was simply overwhelmed by the media attention surrounding the royal exit. Others believed he was focusing on building a new life with Meghan in the United States. But according to several sources cited in the dossier, the change in communication appeared unusually sudden. Friends who had once spoken with Harry regularly found themselves completely disconnected. No explanation. No warning. Just silence. Royal observers later described the shift as one of the earliest signs that Harry's life was undergoing a dramatic transformation, because relationships that had once defined his identity were now disappearing. And those changes did not stop with friendships. Over the following years, additional decisions suggested that Harry was gradually leaving behind many of the traditions and interests that had once been central to his life. One moment in particular caught the attention of several people familiar with his past. In June 2024, after the couple had been living in Montecito, California, for several years, Harry reportedly made a decision that surprised many longtime observers. He sold his collection of handcrafted hunting rifles. The items were not merely expensive sporting equipment. Within British aristocratic culture, such possessions often represent family traditions and personal heritage passed down through generations. To those who knew Harry during his younger years, the sale appeared symbolic. Another connection to his previous life quietly removed. And as these changes accumulated, some members of the royal family began forming their own conclusions about what might be happening. Among them was Queen Camilla. According to sources referenced in Tom Bauer's dossier, Camilla had been observing the situation carefully for several years. And the word she eventually used to describe what she believed she was witnessing shocked many royal insiders. She reportedly called it brainwashing. In the next part of this investigation, we will examine why that word became so controversial and what evidence led some members of the royal household to believe that Prince Harry's identity itself might be changing. When Queen Camilla reportedly used the word brainwashing, it immediately triggered intense debate among royal observers. It is a powerful and controversial term. Using it to describe the transformation of a prince raised serious questions about what exactly she believed was happening behind the scenes. According to Tom Bauer's investigation, the concern did not come from a single event. Instead, it emerged from a pattern of changes that appeared over several years. From Camilla's perspective, the transformation in Prince Harry's life seemed to follow a recognizable sequence. The first stage was social isolation. As we saw earlier, Harry's decision to change his personal phone number cut off communication with many of his longtime friends. For someone who had spent most of his life surrounded by trusted companions, from schoolmates at Eton to fellow soldiers in the military, the sudden disappearance of those relationships raised eyebrows. Grant Harold, a former royal butler who served members of the royal household for several years, later commented publicly that Harry appeared increasingly separated from the environment that once defined him. Harold described the prince as someone who had once thrived on strong friendships and group camaraderie, especially during his years in the armed forces. But after relocating to California, that network seemed to shrink dramatically. The second stage involved personal identity. Over time, Harry began distancing himself from several traditions connected to his upbringing. The sale of his hunting rifles in 2024 was one example that stood out to observers familiar with aristocratic culture. For many members of Britain's upper social circles, activities like countryside shooting or hunting are not simply hobbies. They represent a cultural inheritance passed through generations. By selling those items, Harry appeared to be closing the door on part of that heritage. According to Bauer sources, Camilla interpreted these developments as signs of what she privately described as an emotional monopoly. The concept is straightforward. When an individual becomes separated from their old support systems, friends, family traditions, familiar social networks, they may become increasingly dependent on a much smaller circle of influence. That shift can reshape the way a person sees their own identity. But there was another factor that may have been weighing heavily on Prince Harry's mind during this period. A factor connected to one of the most controversial figures in recent royal history, Prince Andrew. For Harry, the public downfall of his uncle served as a dramatic reminder of how quickly a royal figure's reputation and responsibilities can collapse. Andrew had once been a prominent member of the royal family. Yet after serious scandals and public criticism, he lost many of his official roles and royal privileges. The lesson was clear. Royal titles and status are not guaranteed forever. They exist within a system that ultimately answers to the British state. And according to Bauer's investigation, Harry became increasingly aware of the possibility that his own position could one day face similar scrutiny. Because within British law, there is already a mechanism designed to deal with situations where a royal figure is believed to be damaging the interests of the nation. That mechanism is called the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917. The law was originally created during World War I to allow the government to remove royal titles from individuals whose actions were considered harmful to Britain. For decades, the legislation remained largely unused. But the Andrew controversy reminded many observers that such powers still exist. If tensions between the Sussexes and the monarchy were ever considered severe enough, the same legal pathway could theoretically be examined again. And if that happened, the consequences would extend far beyond royal protocol. Because Harry and Meghan's global public identity remains deeply connected to their royal titles. Without that connection, the entire foundation of the Sussex brand could change overnight. In the next part of this investigation, we will examine why those titles carry such enormous importance and why some analysts believe the legal and financial implications could reshape the couple's future in ways few people fully understand. To understand why the Sussex titles carry such enormous weight, we need to look beyond royal tradition and examine the modern media landscape. In today's global entertainment economy, identity is often linked to branding. Public figures build influence through recognition, credibility, and the perception of authority. For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, their titles as Duke and Duchess of Sussex are more than ceremonial labels. They function as powerful symbols that connect them to one of the most famous institutions in the world. According to analysts quoted in Tom Bauer's dossier, that royal connection plays a major role in the couple's commercial appeal, particularly in the United States. When Harry and Meghan signed media deals with major streaming platforms and publishing companies, part of the value behind those agreements came from their unique position. They were not simply celebrities sharing personal stories. They were insiders from the British monarchy offering a rare perspective into a centuries-old institution. That distinction matters. Without their royal titles, the Sussexes would still remain well-known public figures. But their influence within the global media market could look very different. Some financial analysts believe that if the words royal, duke, or duchess were ever removed from their public identity, the commercial power of the Sussex brand could decline sharply. In the competitive American entertainment industry, where hundreds of personalities compete for attention, that royal association provides a level of distinction that few others possess. This is why the possibility of title removal, however unlikely it may seem, continues to attract so much attention from observers. And it also raises another intriguing question. If Tom Bauer's book truly contains false or damaging claims about Harry and Meghan, why have their lawyers not taken legal action against him? Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have previously demonstrated a willingness to challenge media organizations in court. They have filed lawsuits against several British newspapers over privacy violations and alleged misrepresentation. Yet in the case of Bauer's dossier, one of the most critical investigations ever published about them, the response so far has remained limited to public statements. According to legal experts, the explanation may involve a complex element of litigation known as the discovery process. In many defamation cases, once a lawsuit begins, both sides gain the right to request documents and evidence from one another. These requests can include emails, text messages, internal communications, and testimony from individuals connected to the dispute. In other words, filing a lawsuit does not simply challenge the author's claims. It also opens the door to a detailed examination of the events described in the book. If Harry and Meghan were to sue Tom Bower for defamation, his legal team could potentially request documentation related to the incidents mentioned in the investigation, communications with palace staff, private messages between advisors, or internal records connected to earlier controversies. And because discovery applies to both sides, the Sussex legal team could also be required to produce their own materials relevant to those same events. For many legal strategists, that possibility creates a difficult dilemma. A courtroom challenge might offer a chance to defend their reputation publicly, but it could also introduce a level of scrutiny that extends far beyond the original allegations. In defamation law, one of the strongest defenses is truth. If a defendant can demonstrate that their statements are substantially accurate, the case may collapse entirely. This is why some analysts believe Tom Bower might actually welcome a legal challenge. The discovery process could allow his legal team to request additional documents and testimony that might strengthen the investigation even further. From that perspective, choosing not to sue may represent a calculated legal decision rather than an admission of wrongdoing. For now, the Sussex representatives have dismissed the book's claims as exaggerated and misleading. But the legal silence surrounding the dossier continues to fuel speculation. And as the debate unfolds, one final detail mentioned briefly in Bower's closing chapter has begun attracting enormous curiosity. A recording. According to hints within the investigation, the recording lasts only 12 seconds. But those 12 seconds may capture a moment that took place during Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's final departure from the United Kingdom. A quiet exchange between the couple, recorded on an airport tarmac just before they boarded the flight that carried them toward their new life in California. In the final part of the series, we will examine why those 12 seconds may hold the most intriguing clue in the entire investigation. As the investigation reaches its final stage, one detail continues to stand out above everything else. A recording. According to hints contained in the final chapter of Tom Bower's dossier, the recording is extremely brief, only 12 seconds long. Yet investigators believe it may capture one of the most revealing moments in the entire story surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's departure from the royal family. The recording was allegedly captured during the couple's final exit from the United Kingdom. The date was early 2020, during the turbulent days when negotiations about Harry and Meghan's future were unfolding between Buckingham Palace, Prince Charles, and Prince William. After weeks of intense discussions, the couple prepared to leave Britain and begin a new life abroad. The departure took place at an airport tarmac under heavy security. Members of the royal household were present. Staff coordinated final travel arrangements while photographers waited at a distance. For Harry, the moment represented something deeply personal, the closing of a chapter that had defined his entire life. He had grown up within the walls of the monarchy. From childhood ceremonies to military service and global charity work, his identity had always been tied to the royal institution. Now he was stepping away from that world. According to sources referenced in Bower's investigation, just moments before the couple walked toward their aircraft, a highly sensitive microphone picked up a brief exchange between Harry and Meghan. The conversation lasted only seconds. Witnesses nearby recall that Meghan leaned toward Harry and spoke quietly into his ear. What she said remains unconfirmed. But several individuals who claim to have heard the recording later described the effect it had on Harry's demeanor. They say his posture shifted almost instantly. His expression changed. Within moments, the couple turned and began walking toward the plane that would carry them away from Britain and into a completely new life in California. Whether the recording will ever be released publicly remains unknown. Investigators are still attempting to verify its authenticity, and no official transcript has been confirmed. Yet the story of those 12 seconds continues to circulate among royal observers. Because if the recording exists, it could provide a rare glimpse into the emotional dynamics behind one of the most dramatic royal departures in modern history. As analysts attempt to understand the long-term consequences of the Sussex exit, three possible outcomes are often discussed. The first is a permanent institutional break, where Harry and Meghan continue building their independent careers while remaining distant from the royal family. The second is a gradual fading of royal association, where their public influence slowly shifts toward media, philanthropy, and celebrity culture rather than royal identity. And the third, considered the least likely but still possible, is reconciliation. Throughout history, the British monarchy has survived internal disputes that once seemed impossible to repair. Time, changing circumstances, and personal reflection have sometimes opened doors that once appeared permanently closed. Whether such a path could ever emerge for Prince Harry remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. The story of Harry and Meghan has become far more than a private family disagreement. It has evolved into a global conversation about tradition, modern identity, media power, and the future of one of the world's oldest institutions. And as new documents, testimonies, and investigations continue to surface, the full truth behind the Sussex departure may still be unfolding. Perhaps the final answers will come from historians years from now. Or perhaps they will emerge from unexpected places, documents, recordings, or quiet moments that the world almost overlooked. Because sometimes the most important turning points in history are not found in headlines or speeches. They happen in brief, nearly invisible moments. Moments that last only a few seconds, but change everything that comes after.